All right, welcome back. We're going to look at creating the gaps. We're just going to do a couple practices or practice examples. And we're going to look at these. I just made up these headlines, although the last one is actually pretty real right now. And so let's take a look at these. So we know the first two are actually going to talk about aggregate demand, and the next two, 3 and 4, are going to talk about aggregate supply, and then we are going to talk about number 5, which is occurring right now. So we've got our aggregate supply, we have our aggregate demand, we have our equilibrium point here. So we're saying, hey, we're working at equilibrium. We have our price level here. And then we have our quantity or GDP here, right? And these things are all going to stay the same. So whenever we do a model, an aggregate supply, aggregate demand model, we're going to shift these. One big question is, well, does potential GDP shift? Yes, and we'll talk about that later. So don't worry about that right now. We're just going to look at how are these gaps created. So let's look at, in the short run, let's look at number 1. So businesses invest billions into new factories. So that's going to be an investment. So we know that we are going to increase, right, aggregate demand. Aggregate demand is going to increase. And this is going to be our new equilibrium, right, and our new price level. And so now we have created here, this area right here is our inflationary gap. Right? Later on, we're going to look at numbers, but right now I just want you to recognize, what does the gap look like, okay? And that's what the gap looks like, okay? So we'll go back and we'll get rid of all that stuff, and we'll look at, I won't make them that detailed from here on out, but we're going to, we'll look at those. We'll get rid of that, and we'll erase that. Okay. So let's look back at number 2. Consumers spend billions in record-breaking year for retailers. Okay, we know that's a consumer spending. And we know aggregate demand is going to shift out here. And we've created a new gap right there. There's our inflationary gap again. Okay. All right, let's look at number 3. Oil and lumber prices soar, causing businesses to tighten their belts. This is going to be a aggregate supply and aggregate supply shift. So that's going to shift to the left, and aggregate supply is going to go here, and we're going to get our inflationary gap. Or excuse me, recessionary, not inflationary, recessionary gap. Okay. All right, let's look at number 4. Number 4 says, new industrial technologies make it easier for businesses to produce goods. All right, we're going to see an increase in production. And so we know that aggregate supply is going to shift to the right, and we're going to get something that looks like this. And this is going to be our new equilibrium. We don't mind this one. This is an inflationary gap, yeah, but we'll talk later about why this one, we don't mind that one. All right, that's a good thing. That is also, if you were wondering, that is also something that would increase the long run aggregate supply in the long run. as well. And here we have an inflationary gap. But this one we're not going to worry so much about. Okay, all right. And then the last one, which is how do we know that we are going into a recession? What does that look like? Oh my gosh, COVID-19 fears halt consumer confidence. And so we're going to get this nasty looking leftward shift right here. And it's going to shift to the left, and we're going to get our new aggregate demand here. And as you can see, we're creating, right, we're producing less, right? So unemployment high, right? And GDP is decreasing. Not good stuff. We have a recessionary gap there. That's kind of what it looks like if you were to graph it, just so you have some examples to look at. If you have any questions about how to do that, please let me know. Until next time.